Now we're going to talk a bit about how you actually submit your application. In the next several slides, you'll see some mock-ups of the CAURD application. This is intended to give you an idea of what kind of questions will be included in the application and how those questions will be asked. The actual application itself will be completed entirely online and will look a bit different, but the content will be very similar. Throughout the application, OCM has built in series of help and tip boxes. These boxes will pop up in different sections of the application to provide tips and information. A few examples from the application are shown here. Some tips further explain the requirements, others explain the application process. Read these tip boxes carefully. They are meant to help you. As you may have realized, the CAURD application requires a lot of detailed information. While it may seem kind of intimidating, hopefully you'll see that many of the questions are fairly straightforward. One of the most important things that you can do is make sure you're saving your submission as you go. You will have 30 days to complete and submit this application. Take your time. Use the save button. Review what you've already submitted. Make sure everything is clear. Make sure your documents are readable. Make sure you've completed all of the required sections. Throughout the application, there are opportunities to enter multiple bits of information. You can include information on more than one conviction. You can enter information on all of your owners and partners, etc. Take advantage of those opportunities and include as much detail as possible. Make sure you list everyone who owns or will own even a small part of your proposed dispensary. Make sure you list as much detail as you can for each individual as we request, where they live, financial documents, etc. Being justice involved is a key requirement of being eligible. Providing clear documentation of you or your eligible family member's conviction of a marijuana-related offense is one of the most important things you'll have to submit in your CAURD application. As you can see here, the application will include a list of all convictions that can result in someone being a justice-involved individual. You'll be able to indicate how many times you or your family member have been convicted of each offense. If there are multiple convictions, include as many as possible. Just make sure that you can also submit the required documentation for each. Documentation must clearly show one of the eligible New York State offenses and indicate the arrest or conviction was related to cannabis, marijuana, or hashish. If you have several different documents for one conviction, you may upload them together as one package. As you can see here, you'll be asked what kind of document you're uploading. Whatever documentation you choose to include in your application as proof, the most important thing you can do is make sure that whatever you upload is clear and readable. You'll be asked to describe how your justice-involved individual fulfills the business ownership requirement. You will have to explain what kind of business it was, where it was located, and how the business was owned and structured. Be as specific as possible. State the exact percentage that the justice-involved individual owned. Describe what kind of services or goods you provided. Just a reminder, the qualifying business isn't the dispensary you're hoping to operate. It's the business you previously owned or operated. You should not submit information about your planned dispensary here. We'll ask for that a bit later in the application. In addition to explaining how you qualify to apply for CAURD, your application will also ask for information on how you plan to operate your retail dispensary. Throughout the application, you'll see requests for information on the applicant. That means the dispensary you plan to open. OCM understands that you may not have all of this information right now. For those applications selected to move forward, you will be asked to submit additional detail in a second part of the application. Again, tell OCM what you can at the time of the application. OCM understands that you may not have all of your vendor contracts established or that you may bring in additional financial backers or partners as you move forward. You will submit that information in the second part of the application process. The second part of the application process will give you time to finalize contracts, finances, or ownership interests and include that detail. One of the most important parts of the application will be selecting a region of New York State where you would like to operate a dispensary. As you may have heard, successful CAURD applicants will open dispensaries in locations approved by the office. As part of your application, you will be asked to indicate which region of New York State you would like to operate a dispensary in. Please note the various regions of New York State that can be selected. For the purpose of CAURD, New York City has been separated into 5 boroughs. Applicants should rank the regions in order of preference, with 1 being your most preferred location and 5 being least preferred. Selecting the same region multiple times, for example, selecting Brooklyn as your preference 5 times, will not increase the odds of your being selected for that region. Be thoughtful when selecting your regions. If selected, this is where you'll be offered a dispensary. Is it reasonable for you to work in this region? Will you be able to successfully oversee day-to-day operations in this location? One of the final pieces of information we'll be looking for in this application is your true parties of interest. Simply put, these are all of the different people or companies that have a financial stake in your planned dispensary. We are committed to making sure the New York State cannabis industry isn't controlled by a few giant companies. We want to make sure that average New Yorkers have a chance to join this industry. In order to do that, we are asking for information on all the people who own or control or invest in these dispensaries. Here's a list of some of the most common true parties of interest in a CAURD applicant as defined by the CAURD regulations. Make sure you include the name and required detail for anyone involved in your dispensary who meets these definitions. Each and every TPI, this could include both individuals and/or business entities who meet the definitions we've just discussed, must complete a disclosure form as part of your application. For individuals, this will include personal history disclosures, how a person is involved in an applicant, their employment history, and any criminal history, as well as some financial information. Business entities that are TPIs will have a separate disclosure form to complete, including similar information. Information on TPIs can be found on the OCM website. You should read through that information carefully while you're working on your application. OCM has also posted the actual TPI forms that either individual or business will have to submit. Now is a great time to review and begin completing those forms. Note that for certain types of TPIs, a spouse of a TPI in the applicant would be a TPI in the applicant just because they're the TPI spouse. Not all arrangements with the licensee make a person a TPI. Exceptions extend to certain relationships, including landlords, realtors, consultants who are compensated with the flat fee, goods and services contractors, financial institutions, and financiers. Remember, any person or entity who has control over a CAURD licensee or who meets the definition of TPI in a CAURD licensee, or any entity with ownership in the CAURD license must provide a disclosure and a Department of Tax and Finance clearance form. Here are some more examples of what a TPI could look like. Remember, you'll need to submit information on anyone involved in your application who meets these definitions. You will have the opportunity to update that information if your ownership structure does change. For example, if you bring in new investors, they will also have to complete the TPI. It's very important that OCM is aware of all the different TPIs involved in each application. This is because the MRTA states that no one individual can have an interest in more than 3 cannabis licenses. We have an obligation to make sure that no one individual or company or financier is getting involved in more than 3 different licenses and applications. Finally, you'll be asked to clearly demonstrate where the funding that you currently have for your dispensary is coming from. This will include a listing any investors, any loans, or even gifts that you've received to operate your dispensary business. Be as thorough as possible. These disclosure forms are available on OCM's website, and you can have TPIs in your application. Begin completing them now. When the application is open, you will be required to upload the required TPI disclosure forms for any TPIs in your applicant. And you will be required to input data from these TPI disclosures into fields on the application form. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you found this information helpful and you feel more prepared to submit a CAURD application. If you have more questions about the CAURD license, please submit them to OCM via email at licensing@ocm.ny.gov.